When you say your game is inspired by Deus Ex, those words carry a lot of weight.
The Max might have copper wiring to reroute your fear of pain, but I've got nerves of steel.
Many consider Deus Ex, the immersive sim developed by Ion Storm and released in 2000, to be one of, if not the, best game ever made. But that's what twin brothers Jay Kyle and David Pittman did, releasing an indie title aiming to capture some of Deus Ex's magic. Were they successful? Well, my name is Harvey Bodega, and welcome to Neon Struct, Die Augen der Welt, or The Eyes of the World. I'd say most viewers are in one of two camps, either very familiar with Deus Ex and immersive sims, or not at all, so I'll do a concise summary to bridge the gap. Immersive sims are games governed by a development philosophy thought up by a specific group of creators and those who carry on that legacy. Despite being a general mishmash of genres, what sets them apart is, and I'll use the buzzword, emergent gameplay. Most games would have you traverse a predetermined level utilizing the primary game mechanic of the genre, like shoot them if it's a shooter, sneak by them if it's a stealth game. However, those of the immersive sim mindset think, what if you could sneak, shoot, talk your way past, hack a door to avoid them altogether? The developers may not have even intended for some of those, but due to the versatility of the mechanics and level design, those gameplay options emerge as players discover them. That's emergent gameplay. But understandably, having to code so many open-ended systems results in very difficult development cycles. You see why two brothers creating a title inspired by one of the most complex and, at the time, expensive titles would seem incredibly ambitious. But these two are no slouches. These two brothers came together, forming Minor Key Games, and released 8 games between 2013 and 2017, most of which inspired by immersive sims, Neon Struct being their 4th, released in 2015. The last piece of housekeeping before we jump into the dystopian surveillance state that is Neon Struct, I won't be covering the 2 free games loosely set in the same universe, as they were made for game jams in 2020 and 2021 respectively, and don't relate to the main game's plot. Here in the cyberpunk future, we embody Federal Agent Gillian Cleary, a great fucking name, as she embarks on a series of missions accidentally unraveling a series of conspiracies. The immediate hump to get over in this game is the presentation, Neon Struct's weakest attribute. Let's take a look at the character models, which I describe as cel-shaded stick figures with Dragon Ball Z Scouters, low-poly Star Wars chicken walkers with a Space Marine face on them, or how about these DB Cooper looking-ass strangers? In this fashion store, I can barely tell if these are mannequins or not. In the visual novel dialogue segments, though, that's not what people look like. They have neon outlines. They're okay, but other than the association with the name, they seem out of place. Environments carry a similar level of detail, and that's to say, not very much, very simplistic with very little decoration. How about an expensive hotel suite? A bit bare bones, but comparing it to a federal director's executive office, I've heard of corporate minimalism, but this is ridiculous. The assets also seem to have odd proportions sometimes too, like look closely at Vinod in his chair. Things are really blocky. The cars look like hover P-50s, and the view from Jill's apartment window seems to show little toy skyscrapers. While the opening credits are stylish, alerted guards move more like spy crabs, and pigeons fly off and boomerang right back, so I'll politely summarize the visuals as basic. Audio is similar, made clear by the sound you'll hear the absolute most: footsteps. Like Thief or Filcher, footstep sounds change on different floor materials and have an important stealth gameplay function. You need to know how much noise you're making, so footsteps are sharp, somewhat discordant noises. Sure, grass and carpet sound applicably muffled, but normal flooring gets pretty loud, and metal flooring is downright cacophonous. It's a bit overwhelming around a lot of enemies, footsteps on wet surfaces are terrible, and robots just reuse the metal footstep noise. Other effects aren't much better. Knocking someone out sounds like you're hitting them with a binder. The gun noise sounds very different from the sound even a futuristic gun would make, topped off with a bizarre, repetitive exclamation when Jill gets hit. Sure, none of the sounds are good, but I found myself most disappointed about one that was missing. Let's do a comparison. What did it look like I was doing? Well, I was sliding. A mechanic Filcher also has. I really felt the absence. In lacking voice acting altogether, with the exception of... I've had little complimentary to say about the presentation, but I'm happy to talk about the music. I'm going to take a quick tangent, but it's relevant, I promise. I have a very arcane and bizarre yet systematic and highly organized way of choosing which games to cover for the channel. One way I add a game to my ridiculously titled Excel tab, list of games to perhaps cover, is looking for specific attributes. An easy example being choosing Aussie August games by finding Australian-developed titles about Australia. In this same vein, I have previously looked for games with some of my favorite music subgenres as their soundtrack. The vague, bizarre genre salami including indie pop, synthwave, shoegaze, dream pop, something in the categories of Beach House, Men I Trust, Cigarettes After Sex, The Japanese House, and Chromatics, and though Paradise Killer was sort of in the same solar system with a great city pop vaporwave soundtrack, I played it for a different reason and it wasn't exact. Truth is, back then I struck out in my search and focused my research elsewhere, then accidentally stumbling across Struct, learning its soundtrack was what I was looking for. The home conversion was the Dallas sibling synthwave duo who were personal friends with David Pittman, inspired by Chromatics. I was delighted. This was what I was looking for. Now, I didn't add any of these tracks to playlists, and it's best described as serviceable synthwave of the era, and the combat music is not my favorite. I was bummed to learn that Andrew and Ann Strickland of the home conversion seem to have moved on from this project, only releasing 3 EPs on Bandcamp, the latest of which being for Struct in 2015. That said, I want to highlight how much I enjoyed their work while playing. Other than the soundtrack I very biasedly enjoyed, the presentation is a definite weakness for Struct. As discussed with Filcher though, immersive sims and stealth games especially are made or broken by their mechanics, and the first thing to get out of the way is that Struct is way closer to Thief than it is Deus Ex. Mainly Struct is a stealth game with some emergent gameplay decisions scattered throughout, so the most important functions are the movement and stealth mechanics. We've got a sprint, crouch, slide, lean, and vision zoom, and you determine how stealthy you're being with your Hudson, the DBZ scouter thing that people wear, which, instead of providing a light gem, is a light, Jeep Wrangler. That'll tell you how visible you are, but sound also plays a role. Honestly, I don't know if it's a significant role, but it plays a part somehow. Like, you have to be stealthy or you'll be discovered, at best lowering your score at the end of a mission, or at worst you'll get damaged and health rolls over to the next level, or even worse than that, you'll just get killed and have to start over from the last save. Thankfully the autosave system is really generous and only screwed me over once, but the point is you don't want to be discovered. The sound seems to mostly not matter until occasionally really matters, and that's frustrating. A lot of times I just ran around in the dark even on loud floors, and at most, the guards may be alerted, or they creep towards the spot they last heard a noise. My biggest gameplay complaint rises from this tendency, as guards who are alerted but don't see you will still follow you exactly, somehow. They won't attack unless I basically slap them in the face, but they'll spy crab after me slowly. If you don't mind getting a lower score by knocking them all out, this doesn't matter much, but going for completionism, it's more frustrating and tedious than a real challenge. Levels will have a complex yet understandable layout. Perhaps that simplistic presentation is a benefit here, as I found myself lost less frequently than I was in Filcher, able to picture the layout of the map as I go rather than through trial and error. Progression requires completing objectives in a specific order, mostly requiring avoiding guards, finding something, getting keycards to open doors, and hacking into things. Agent Gillian Cleary has a BIT, B-I-T, a state-of-the-art piece of equipment creatively standing for break-in tool, allowing her forbidden access to, well, about a third of the doors. What's the user interface of this hyper-advanced device of the future's totalitarian government? Blockbreaker on a Game Boy, so not great. Deus Ex automatically hacked into things on a timer, and JC Dented could be attacked while hacking. Struct is the same, just with a minigame instead of a timer, which I can't say is an improvement. Lockpicking or hacking minigames are almost always lame, but here comes the truth. At least this one is lame in a way I enjoy. I'll admit, I like Blockbreaker, though I don't actively seek to play it, so it didn't bother me, and dare I say, I even enjoyed it a little bit. It could be worse, it could be frustrating or tedious, but it wasn't too painful. In addition to the Hudson and BIT, Struct has a small arsenal of items available for purchase or looting that can make a significant difference. I won't go through every one, as they're mostly self-explanatory or very rare, like health stims heal you, hacking stims auto-hack something, cloak stims cloak you, etc. The main one to highlight is geocache tokens. Geocache? Geocache? I've always said geocache, but I think it's geocache. Geocaching is a real niche hobby, basically turning the world into a treasure hunt. Today, as you're listening, at least 3 million little containers called geocaches are hidden all over the world, usually filled with knickknacks and personal items. To geocache hobbyists, the goal is to find them using their coordinates, take one item, leave one item, and sign your name on a ledger to mark you found this individual cache. My one experience with geocaching was a well-known one hidden in our municipal park back in high school, but it's a well-established hobby, with each geocache getting an entry in the geocaching website, differentiated by location, accessibility, size, difficulty, and giving others a chance to favorite or comment on individual finds. A cool shout out to a niche hobby, but in-game, geocaches function the same way. You sign the ledger, get a geocache token, although you're meant to also put something back inside, and finding all of them within a level raises your score. The tokens are a numerous item, similar to finding bottles to throw in Filcher, simply an item meant to make noise and distract guards. I'll say again, very cool implementation of an interesting niche hobby, but tokens were where my frustrations with the inconsistency around the sound mechanics were at their absolute highest. Throw a token when a guard is already alerted, they'll ignore it. Throw a token too close to a guard, they'll notice you instead. And when it finally actually works, well, after investigating, the guards inexplicably creep towards your exact location, although it makes no sense for them to know where you're at if you're in the dark and making no noise. Something just isn't right in the way sound and enemy AI is programmed. It's frustrating, and in most levels I did my best to use no items at all, or just the most user-friendly ones like health stims. I do wish there was a flashlight though, that seems like a needless frustration. So on most levels, you sneak around, complete the objective, and move on to the next of the 23 missions within Struct. The first 40% or so are very easy on the normal level, but subsequent ones are more challenging and engaging. Although most are stealth levels, in between them are what I'll call RPG levels, where you're not in any direct danger but walking around environments, talking to people, and what you do in these sections can have significance for the rest of the game. Ask the wrong person for directions, and you can blow your cover, resulting in more enemies on the next stage. But bigger examples involve determining the ultimate fate of side characters. These, other than the cyberpunk setting and motifs of government secrecy, is where the Deus Ex crops up in this otherwise thief-like game. While these choices are mostly on the nose, choose A, B, or maybe C predetermined options, a few emergent, subtle ImSim choices appear as well. A guy lost the keycard to his hotel room, he asks you to find it. You can help, or ignore him, but not directly stated you could find his card, raid his hotel room, then give it back to him for an additional reward. There are not a ton of emergent gameplay decisions like these, but it's nice to see. I was really disappointed that there was not an expecting a show Easter egg. Jill walking into the men's restroom, it was a perfect opportunity, didn't happen.
Expecting a show.
You have a lot of options in stealth missions like Thief, the Deus Ex RPG-light areas are a nice change of pace, and these put together are admittedly quite ambitious and commendable for a game with credits mostly comprised of citing fonts rather than employees. Despite almost no bugs and running very well, does Struct feel scaled down or undercooked at times? Sure, but how many games out there are like this? Not many, and Struct was particularly early to the ImSim renaissance, 2 years before Prey and only a few after the first Dishonored. Was I wowed by the emergent gameplay or mechanics? No, but they're serviceable, and those looking for games shooting for the elusive immersive sim philosophy, Struct does check that box, albeit simply. Last to discuss is the story. Deus Ex was lauded for a creative, layered, and somewhat prophetic narrative allowing notable control over plot elements and designed to say something about the player engaging with these options, politically and otherwise. Struct shoots for a less ambitious version of a similar vision. As mentioned, you play Federal Agent Gillian Cleary, a government spook, if you will, specializing in gaining access to forbidden places unnoticed. As Gillian Cleary, again, great fucking name, completes tasks for the agency and Director Furtwängler, terrible fucking name, she begins noticing things that seem off, questioning the motives of what she's been asked to do. Since the narrative is easily summarized but has several branching options, I'll toss the spoiler timecode up now. Go play Struct for yourself to experience the narrative, and jump forward to the time on screen now to avoid me viciously spoiling plot elements. Alright, so Jill asks way too many questions to work for a government organization and not end up in a body bag almost instantly, but in-game, they seem surprisingly open with her. That said, until she's given a task to hold an individual for arrest for the manufacture of illegal stims. He tells her, while the police are inbound, of a conspiracy to implant everyone in the world with tracking chips to surveil them against their will. Imagine something on your person to track your movements at any time. It's real science fiction stuff, and apparently such a bombshell of a discovery that director Furtwängler immediately imprisons Jill in perpetuity upon her return to the agency after hearing this information. I don't know what's worse, being imprisoned anonymously in a government cell to rot for the rest of your life, or being in Philadelphia. Anyway, thankfully Jill's old colleague Vinod helps her out of her solitary confinement cell, allowing her to ply her trade to break out of prison and collect information along the way. Go to a futuristic surgery chair to get your tracking implant out. Thankfully, no recovery time. Go see a weird religious lady named Alyssa Lawrence, normal fucking name, to sleep for the night. Pet peeve, I hate the cliche of religious figures in movies, books, games, etc. using weird, unnecessary, and unrealistic culty language like, my child. But after waking, it's off to a New York City safe house. Psych, it's already being raided. Throw the police off track and escape through a nearby mall. Here, a few strange things can happen, as it's the first level I really noticed how frequently I was stumbling across individuals wearing sunglasses simply named Stranger. And talking to a mall cop has them recognize you because of their Hudson Scouter device, but won't turn you in if you get them a hot dog. Relatable. Here is my least favorite part of the narrative. Jill says she has some place to stay, but it's a friend's apartment that she hasn't spoken to since college about 10 years ago. If college was 10 years ago, then you're like 32 and haven't seen these people for a third of your life. Why would she assume this was a good idea? Why would this not be a particularly cruel idea to put them in danger? Well, maybe they thought so too, because they drug Jill, leaving her vulnerable for arrest, and the game definitely wants you to condemn them for this. They could be sent to the gulag for unknowingly helping a federal fugitive. I definitely think they did the right thing here, especially for someone they haven't seen in a decade, but I digress. While unconscious, Jill has a dreamlike vision, stealthing herself through a subconscious level patrolled by abstractions with devil heads titled things like insecurity or guilt. Yet there's still a stranger here. Here's another fork in the road where I have to talk about my bias. I was biased in favor of Blockbreaker of all things. I like dream pop or synthwave type music. This is a place where I'm biased against Neon Struct. A lot of games have forced, subconscious, dreamlike scenarios typically meant for characterization that wouldn't otherwise naturally come out in the narrative, and they mostly don't work or feel like bad writing. For example, in Dragon Age Origins near the top of the Mage Tower, a demon sends you to what's called the Fade, basically a magical, intangible realm. It takes ages to break your way out, and the whole purpose of the segment is lazy, forced characterization of your party and some cool visuals. Neon Struct is similar, as they're trying to turn Gillian Cleary into an actual character rather than just your avatar, but those things are at odds with the RPG choice segments. Deus Ex is like this, but instead of feeling at odds with itself, J.C. Denton always feels like J.C. Denton, and you're simply guiding him in a believable direction.
How unprofessional.
Jill doesn't have enough time or depth to be a real character, so I'll say again, I'm biased against these segments. Well, thankfully, Jill is awoken prior to her arrest and escapes guided by a new individual named Peter Tannhauser, allowing her to get to London. Within the next 2 levels, Jill learns the secret surveillance program is a security measure being implemented by a governing cabal that calls themselves the Nameless Echelon of the Order of Nations, or Neon, headed up by an individual only known as the Eye. Peter asks Jill to use her abilities to break into a Neon facility to delete files on him so they'll stop harassing him and spreading misinformation, and within the Neon database, Jill can delete files on herself as well, though that won't necessarily stop Neon from hunting her down. He tells her that in addition to the forced, unwilling tracking of an increasing percentage of humanity, Neon has a device called, predictably, Struct, a VR artificial intelligence database that not only allows you to learn a bunch of stuff, but have the tool visualize and build it for you in virtual reality. I have a lot of questions as to how this thing works, like if I look up how did John Franklin die on the Terror Erebus expedition, will it show me like a video of what happens, or will it just show a video of what it guesses happens, or will it like be watching a movie and it's just an extrapolation? I don't know. But in-game, it knows everything and you can see it. Let's keep moving as we've now filled in all the missing pieces to understand our title. Jill breaks in and enters Struct, which appears as a vaporwave, System Shock cyberspace grid that sort of looks like laser tag to me. Here, she can delete data on herself if she wants to, but she has to delete the data for Peter, and finds out that the I is Beatrice Chung, British consulate to Germany. Well, you tell Peter, and he sends you to a Hamburg nightclub to find someone who may know where her safe house is. And I tell you, this club is bumping and grinding and the most boring fucking place I've ever seen. These are not the discotheques I've heard about. But anyway, you interrogate some guy and find her safe house. Now, in the last real level, you need to break into Beatrix Chung's safe house and interrogate her. Finally reaching her after dying several times, all you do is have a conversation, confirming details, and the two sides of the argument are laid out. Are you on the side of the surveillance state, meant to increase security and minimalize crime, yet machinate from behind the scenes? Or are you on the side of Peter Tannhauser, a supporter of free press, but a businessman trying to cover his own behind and make a lot of money for his independent media company? Leaving Beatrix Chung anticlimactically, the final stage is going and talking to Peter, where you decide which of the 4 endings you want. The first binary choice is whether or not to break the story about Neon. If no, Jill can leverage her way into being the director of the agency that previously imprisoned her, or just go do her own thing. Either will allow Neon's surveillance program to continue. If she does break the story, Jill can decide to become the face of independent expose media, becoming a guerrilla investigative journalist. And choosing that results in Peter getting rich, or Jill can do her own thing starting an independent firm, either way resulting in Neon being quietly disbanded. Peter just less influential if Jill goes on her own. The results are spelled out in a cyberspace-like ending area, showing what happened to all the side characters, Jill herself, and a little bit of the world around her. For example, which option you choose somehow results in whether or not the couple that drugged Jill divorcing or trying to profit off their experience, whether Vinod is forever imprisoned or not, and several others. Finally, a stranger bids you farewell, and you exit a door to the credits. So, the political ambiguity of Deus Ex is lacking in Neon Struct, but it's almost there. If Peter was more of an opportunistic, self-interested entrepreneur in support of free press as a means to an end, and Beatrix Chung was a well-intentioned bureaucrat trying to make the world a better place while avoiding red tape, it would feel like more of an actual choice. But Beatrix was the antagonist most of the game. Vinod, the guy who saved you multiple times, is forever imprisoned unless Jill becomes the face of independent media, and no matter which ending, Neon Struct makes it clear the surveillance program has no tangible or noticeable benefit. That said, it's a serviceable homage to Deus Ex with some fun cause and effect, despite being pretty simple. As for the strangers, well, they involve a collectathon mechanic resulting in an ARG leading to a code provided in a secret area on the final level, translating to Neon Struct is a game. So take that for what you will. Alright, let's welcome back our spoiler avoiders. Our narrative is admittedly a little underdeveloped, feeling more like a lighthearted fanfiction or something rather than a well-established world with believable characters, but it commits no wrongs, resulting in a palatable, unsophisticated story. So Neon Struct is a fun, small-scale homage to Deus Ex and Thief, a task incredibly difficult even today, let alone done by two brothers back in 2015. While the result may feel like an immersive sim, 2011's Drive, and the 2010 Edward Snowden WikiLeaks disclosures thrown into a blender, the result is credit to the Pittman brothers' abilities despite being undercooked. I feel like I've been pretty critical throughout much of this video, but to shoot for something so incredibly difficult and committing no game-breaking, unpardonable errors is quite the achievement for an indie duo, and I had a fair bit of fun with Neon Struct. That tees me up perfectly for the recommendations section. In grading in each of my categories and compiling into an overall grade, Neon Struct falls into my recommendation tier only for niche audiences. While Filcher was easier to recommend for fans of stealth or immersive sim games, landing it in the genre enjoyers tier, Neon Struct is best for immersive sim superfans who are looking for those rare experiences paying homage to this niche genre. Admittedly, a narrower audience. With that, I'm going to thank you so much for watching. My name is Harvey Bodega, I hope all is well, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.